My F34 husband, M35, blames me for his COVID infection and his subsequent long COVID. So my F34 husband, M35, blames me for his COVID infection and his subsequent long COVID that has dramatically changed our lives. We've been married for 5 years. We have been COVID-conscious people from the beginning. Masking, limiting time around others, vaccinations, HEPA filters. He already had a disorder that caused him to be immunocompromised before COVID. I have never, knowingly, caught COVID. Husband caught COVID in late 2022 and developed debilitating long COVID symptoms in early 2023. He had to resign from his job in 2023, and since we were a one-income home, we had to move in with a relative late 2023. Relative is not as worried about COVID, so we mask inside the house's common areas and unmask in our portion of the house. It has been a major struggle for us to adjust. Most days he is too lethargic, sick to even get out of bed. I've been supportive in being his caretaker, taking care of house responsibilities, cleaning, bills, and taking him to appointments when I can, all while still keeping my full-time job. A few months ago, after moving in with the relative, we had a conversation about him believing I gave him COVID asymptomatically and him having resentment for me from that. Around the time he caught COVID, a different relative of mine was in town. I hung out with that relative outside unmasked, and that relative tested negative multiple times before we allowed him into our home to visit for a few hours. That relative was not sick after our visit with us. That same weekend, husband went into a small, very packed restaurant to pick up food while masked, so there is no way of knowing exactly how he caught it. I was very worried that that kind of resentment would fester into a real issue for our relationship. Because of all of his struggles with LC, he reassured me that that was not the case and we moved on. Fast forward to a few nights ago, I had a medical procedure that I had to be unmasked for, so we agreed that I would mask and then test after 7 days. I waited the 7 days, tested negative, made dinner for us, and we started eating dinner together in our space. After dinner he realized I wasn't masking and asked why. I told him it was because I tested negative. He says he wanted to talk to me about getting a PCR test to verify, but just hadn't found the right time to do it since I've been very stressed with everything lately. He apologized for not communicating with me on that, but he also mentioned again that he felt I asymptomatically gave him COVID. I was perplexed that he brought it up again when a few months ago he assured me he didn't believe that. So I just feel like an idiot. He lied to me about his feelings on this, and, at least in my eyes, he has some level of resentment towards me about COVID. I have been nothing but supportive and sacrificing for his health needs, and he still feels as if I did this to him. What should we do? Couples therapy? Any advice is welcome. Adding a note. I have a WFH job and we have been wearing N95s or better during this whole pandemic. Edit. Thank you all for your input and sharing your opinions. There has been a lot of good info about chronic illness, disabilities, and how mental health can be damaged by these things. Beating heart, I will definitely be looking into therapy for us. However, I fear that some people who don't fully understand how debilitating LC can be have found this thread and are adding unnecessary, hateful comments now. I get that some people believe we are extra when it comes to our personal precautions, but we respect others' choices to go back to normal, and we hope others can show respect as well to us. I mean, anybody could have given him COVID, mask or not. If his mask ever had a gap, which most of, there's always a chance. Same as the flu and other airborne infections. I honestly think he's beyond overreacting. If it's that bad and you truly need to work it out, then I'd try therapy. Couples therapy and individual therapy for both of you. ASAP. Telehealth is a great option, especially for him. This is a really difficult situation for both of you. He has acquired an incredibly disabling condition that may never fully go away and is dealing with a complete change to his daily life, identity, goals, dreams, etc. You are dealing with a huge change in the person you married and reimagining what your life together looks like, as well as stepping into a caregiver role. Both sides are very hard to deal with and can put strain on the relationship as complex emotions come up. There are many reasons why he might be bringing up that you gave him COVID. Maybe it's easier to blame you than to blame himself for going to that crowded restaurant now that he is suffering. Or maybe he doesn't feel that he deserves your care and attention now that he can't reciprocate in the same ways and is trying to push you away. Or any number of dysfunctional ways of thinking. He needs therapy and you need therapy, and you both need therapy in order to deal with this extremely emotional situation. You sound very caring, and I wish you both the best of luck. Please make sure you are receiving appropriate emotional support during this time as well. He's not the only one going through difficult times. I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV. But I am immune compromised and also have a medical background. The strains of COVID circulating right now are a little different than early on, and since most people have been exposed or have been vaccinated, people are showing symptoms before the at-home tests can show positive in many cases because they're not as sensitive as a PCR. This makes using home tests as a guide less effective and actually increases the false negatives. If you haven't had any symptoms in a week, then you're past the CDC guidelines for needing to take the more extreme precautions as a potential carrier. While asymptomatic spread is certainly possible, the window is much shorter now because our bodies are identifying the virus much faster. This creates a whole other issue of people thinking they just have a cold and carry on as if with a negative home COVID test, since they don't have enough viral load at that point to register. A cold will put me in the hospital too. It's all concerning to me. I think your partner needs to talk to his doctor or read up a bit more about where we are at now with COVID. I can appreciate that he's miserable and scared. And after 4 years of this, tired of feeling like everyone else has moved on but he can't. He may need a therapist for himself. I think it's easier for him to blame you than to blame himself. Sit down with him, walk through his logic of asymptomatic COVID when all tests indicated otherwise. Tell him that you think it's the restaurant outing. See how he responds. The mask is not the ultimate protection, and that because you were unmasked at one point, then you're definitely the source. Especially when you tested negative multiple times. It's absolutely ridiculous to say with any degree of certainty who gave you the virus. The only way to know would be to purposely infect yourself, or you could be almost certain if you stayed home 100% of the time. Sure, sometimes you can have a plausible theory, but it's very rare to know with certainty. So yeah, maybe online couples therapy to help him understand the above. It's science. I work in an office setting, and the number of times people claim to know how they got sick, COVID or otherwise, is crazy. I just roll my eyes. In my mind, you guys took more than the recommended precautions. There is absolutely no way to know who he got it from. Even if he somehow did get it from you, his resentment is unjustified. It would have been an accident. This medical procedure you had was just recently? And you masked inside the house for 7 days after and then tested yourself? That's so extra. He's being ridiculous. Let's say you gave him COVID and he could 100% prove it. Which he can't. But let's say that despite all your masking and testing, you did it. Now what? Is he going to destroy your marriage over it? Come on. What a jerk. Couples therapy. Maybe. If he refuses, you should go on your own. To help you figure out whether you want to stay in a relationship where the other person is guilting and harassing you over something you can't control. Lots of people giving good feedback on the COVID stuff and reality of it. You took all reasonable precautions NTA. But if you guys can do therapy for him, or find a support group, I'd encourage that. Getting a life-altering diagnosis of any kind is hard. It's certainly not unheard of to lash out and to ask, why me? Life isn't fair. And while we all know that logically, it can be very different when your life changes drastically in ways that you don't want. You grieve. There are stages to grieving, including anger. I suspect it's not so much that he logically believes you gave it to him. I think he's angry at how much he's lost out of life. Scared that this is his future. Guilty that he can't contribute and that the loss of the second income means that you have to live with a relative. And he probably feels helpless because he doesn't know how or if he can ever turn things around. That's a scary thing to process. Is it fair he lashes out at his supportive partner? No. It's not. And it's not okay. But maybe understanding why can make it easier to understand. I imagine money is tight. But if there is funding, or support groups, or even forums, maybe see if there's anything to help process? You'll never know where or how. He is using you as a scapegoat for his frustration. Long COVID is no joke. He literally cannot work. So he is resentful because your life has pretty much gone back to normal. He needs to talk to MD and therapist. You do not deserve this. I think when a person is grieving a loss, like his health, it's very tempting to assign blame. Unfortunately, he's picked you. Also unfair and unhealthy. This is corroding your marriage. I recommend counseling because he needs to find a better way to grieve and not fall into resentment. I think he should consider therapy and maybe couples therapy as well. This is kind of a framing issue for him and he needs to do some processing. I got COVID from my mom when she came up to visit me. Have had debilitating symptoms for a year. She could have been more careful and taken more precautions. But I do not blame her in the slightest for my infection or long COVID. It's a pandemic. I could just as easily have gotten it from a grocery store or a restaurant or just someone walking by me. We all just do the best we can in the times of a pandemic. Tell him it sounds like he should go live on his own. He is being an ass. You're both experiencing a tremendous loss. He of his health, you of your previously well and able-bodied partner. Add to the fact that long COVID is a majorly disenfranchised sort of grief. Because most of society behaves like they will for sure never get it. And of course there's dark emotions swirling around. But your partnership won't survive if you can't work through them and see each other's losses as legitimate and without blame. I hope you can find a therapist. Ideally one who's experienced with chronic illness, is pro-disability justice, and is not a COVID minimizer. Who can help you both be a team against the problem, not against each other. We have an issue. You clearly retain some degree of resentment towards me, believing I gave you COVID. I do not know how to resolve this. As even setting aside the inherent difficulty of proving a negative, there simply is no way to ever know, one way or the other. So, I think we should consider engaging a third party to help us. Perhaps a therapist, because I want our relationship to be strong and healthy. And I worry that your theory will continue to be not just an issue but a growing problem. The longer you suffer from long COVID. Couples therapy could be helpful. But he really needs individual therapy. He needs to find other ways to process his feelings about his limitations and health issues beyond fantasizing about who's to blame. It's irrelevant, and won't change anything about his current situation. Outside of you trying to actually get him sick, it has zero bearing on his life, and this train of thinking will only cause him more pain. I have deep sympathy for someone struggling from long COVID like he is. But it's literally no one's fault. Not his. Not yours. Not society's. It's a mindless virus that is doing what it's evolved to do. This was a couple of years ago, but my husband and I contracted COVID the same time. His turned into long COVID. He then had a heart attack at age 46. He never once accused me of giving it to him. Your husband is overreacting, and he could have got it from anywhere. Mask or not. He blames you because he hates the fact that you never got sick. He probably hates the fact that you are his caretaker and breadwinner. He hates the situation he is in, and this has turned into a massive resentment towards you. Because he has no justification for his resentment. He created in his mind the story of how you are the cause of his problems because you somehow infected him with COVID. This man has no gratitude for your sacrifices for him and no love for you. He actually hates you. All your love and effort are for nothing. This is honestly ridiculous. This sounds freaking exhausting. He's literally looking for something to be upset, angry about. There's no way to know who gave him COVID, so he's deciding to blame you and keep bringing it up. Dude needs therapy.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.